Welcome to Community Roundtable. I'm Nick Burns from the Salt Lake Community College Communication Department, and I'm your host as we explore topics of special interest and of concern to the residents of the cities and the unincorporated areas of Salt Lake County. And these are topics that are equally important to the general public, we feel, throughout all the state of Utah. And today, on Community Roundtable, we'll talk with the first woman in the state of Utah to hold the position of Athletic Director. During her tenure at Salt Lake Community College, her coaches and student athletes have brought home multiple conference and regional wins, and they brought home some national titles too. At the same time, Salt Lake Community College has expanded its sports teams, built new facilities, recruited players from all over the world. Now, after over 2 decades of service, she's stepping down. So Norma Carr, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's nice to be here.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. And I hope all this retirement hoopla isn't too overwhelming after all you've done here. But can we go back to Davis High and years and years and years ago?
Sure.
What did you play when you were an athlete yourself in high school?
Didn't have the opportunity to play when I was in high school.
Okay.
I didn't actually play anything until I ended up at BYU. And really, my first year there didn't play. I didn't know anything about it until at the end of my first year I heard they had some teams.
So in high school, no women's sports?
No women's sports in high school.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Were you an athlete on your own?
Yeah, at that point, I'd played church ball. I'd played some elite recreation ball, and particularly softball, and some AAU and a few of the other sports. But a lot of the sports weren't coached very well necessarily. They were it was very cutting end, very recreational type thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So by the time you were a sophomore, you went to the Y.
Yes.
Then you started playing basketball?
Actually started playing volleyball.
Okay.
Played volleyball, basketball, softball, and then my last year there did a little bit of archery and also some tennis. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Was that typical for a woman who wanted to be an athlete to pretty much have to do it all?
Well, in our day, you didn't have full schedules like now. You had play days, so you'd practice and then you'd play it all on one weekend.
Okay.
Not only play, but officiate all on one weekend. Then it multiplied to a couple of weekends doing that. So, and you'd play and travel together. Sometimes we'd even travel on buses. We'd pick up Weber or University of Utah and go to someplace in Colorado to play. And all the schools that have like A and B varsity teams, and you'd play and, like I said, all weekend and referee, and then you'd go home.
And so there were spots for women to referee and to officiate?
Yeah, in fact, we all took classes in physical education at that time to become referees and to get our ratings, and I was a national rated official in volleyball, basketball, and softball.
Wow, okay.
So went out and started refereeing in some of the high schools and church and got paid sometimes. Sometimes it was volunteer and sometimes it was $1 a game.
$1 a game?
Yeah.
Easy to buy off the refs, I guess, at $1 a game.
Yeah.
So your career goals at that point were like high school officiating or to be a teacher, or what exactly?
My goal was to be a high school teacher.
Okay.
And eventually if there was coaching opportunities, fine. And then as I got further in my career in college, my question was whether to even go into high school or whether to go directly into college. But I thought I'd be maybe more marketable if I went into the high school first, and so I did that.
Did you have a career goal to end up AD like you are now?
You know, once I got into the college, I had a desire to be an administrator. In fact, I did my master's work in physical education and administration. And so when the opportunity came to come to Salt Lake, even though it wasn't necessarily planned, it was a good opportunity, a good place. I didn't have to interrupt my retirement. I didn't have to sell my house, so on and so on.
You were still here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was
close.
still here. Uh-huh.
So what was that like, though, to go back to Davis High where you were a student then to like be a coach or teach? That would, some people could handle that, maybe some not so much.
The difficult part was the teachers and the principals were a lot of them the same as when I was a student. So to treat them as my equal was tough. But once I got through that, it was really good. And you know, I had a desire. I actually had a real opportunity to go and coach and teach other places, California and whatever, before there was a teacher glut and then there was job shortages. But I wanted to go back to Davis because I knew what they didn't have, and I wanted to make a difference and make some changes. And that did happen while I was there. So.
Like what? What kind of changes?
Well, we updated some of the facilities for one thing,
Okay.
some of the gymnasiums, things like that. But there was no girls' sports in the high school that time, so we started it, even though we got little slips of paper saying we couldn't do it, but we were starting to be the catalyst to do it anyway. And then the state organization, the High School Association, started asking us to help them integrate sports into the high schools, because they had allowed some of the girls to play on East High and Judge Memorial's tennis teams.
Okay.
In the region, but when it came state tournament, they couldn't play. Well, Title IX was, and equity was going on at this time, and there started threats of lawsuits. So that started, okay, help us bring high school sports on. And at that time, it was battles. I mean, it was real battles, because you were treading on the domain of male turf, and they saw us as a threat. They couldn't be in the facilities. You were going to get all the money, all those kinds of things. And I remember even in my own high school being really sometimes brutalized verbally by the coaches.
Interesting. For
wanting to do things and whatever. Now, since that time, they've apologized, and they have grandkids and daughters that have played and so on, and they see the value of it.
Funny how things change.
But the first few years were very brutal to try to bring it on, and very bitter battles, really.
Were you ready for that? Did you expect those battles?
For a woman to even be participating in sports that we were really kind of discriminated all of our growing up years, I think it prepared us. And as Title IX was being put forth as legislation, we got involved with trying to help make that happen. So it helped us transition into what was coming in our future.
Okay.
So,
because I can think in the Midwest, things like girls' high school basketball, I mean, they preempt television for that at night. So was Utah kind of behind the curve in getting women into sports? Did it take laws to make it happen?
Yep. If there wasn't laws, it wouldn't have been here.
Wow.
And Utah, you think Utah was behind, but so was a lot of the western states. Idaho, Wyoming, New Mexico, all of them were behind. In fact, we actually got out of the chutes a little quicker than they did on a lot of things.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So from Davis then up to the U as a coach?
Yeah. Went up to coach and to get my master's.
Okay.
I got paid so much, like a graduate assistant. I got paid so much a sport. So went from a full-time paying job, even though it wasn't a lot in those days, to a graduate assistant. I was head coach of volleyball, head coach of softball.
As a TA?
And assisted with basketball.
Wow.
And got my master's.
Wow.
So
you like to be busy?
Well, I had no choice at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Well, when we come back, I want to ask more about coaching, because you coached volleyball, softball, and basketball. You were involved in all three of those sports, and I want to ask how that kind of set you up and how those were different than when you came over to Salt Lake Community College as our athletic director. So we'll be right back with more Community Roundtable, talking today with Norma Carr, current and soon to retire athletic director at Salt Lake Community College. Keep it tuned. We'll be right back. We are back on Community Roundtable, talking with Norma Carr, Athletic Director at Salt Lake Community College. And you were saying that as a grad student at the U, volleyball, softball, and basketball, I mean, you pretty much had to do it all, but are those the same skill sets to coach three really kind of wildly different sports?
Well, let's go back to high school. I coached all the team sports. I coached tennis. I coached gymnastic. I coached track and field, too, as well as taught a full load and had the pep club, or the cheerleaders during that tenure. So you started out doing that already, and you were prepared because you were prepared in PE, in your educational classes, and I did the competing in some of them when I was obviously in college. So that was our preparation at that time, and then we were learning as we went along, and you went to coaches' clinics and you learned more and more and more. But when I got to the U and did so many of the sports, I was only the assistant basketball coach, and that was a one-year gig because they had a JV team and dropped it after the first year. So I continued to do volleyball and softball for a total of 4 years.
Okay.
And then I made the choice to stay with softball to finish my career. So things evolved even through that time frame, and after I took the 2 years to get my master's, then I was starting to work up the chain again on some full-time pay. So.
And your career goal to be in administration
Absolutely.
eventually.
Yes, and I was given a little bit of an opportunity, no name attached to it, no title, to be do some administrative things for the women's athletics, because the women's athletic director at that time was also the women's basketball coach, so she couldn't always go to the AIAW or the NC2A rules legislative meetings. So I got that experience, as well as when I was a coach for softball, I had legislative experience with the NC2A eventually, and things like that, which was invaluable working into my administrative experience here at Salt Lake Community College.
So I mean, that would have well set you up for this job.
Yeah.
It seems like.
Well, it sets you up in terms of being in those political arenas with governing bodies. True, the NJCA isn't as big and as dynamic politically as the NC2A, but it still helped me learn and know how to handle things on that level.
And as you alluded to earlier with the boys club.
Yeah.
Because it still was primarily boys club, I presume.
In fact, when my final interview with Vice President Morgan, I remember him saying to me, now my biggest concern is that all the athletic directors in the conference are men, and they're very dynamic and very forceful. And he says, I'm not sure you'll be able to handle that. And I just told him that for a woman to be in athletics period at this time, and to be, we've learned how to fight and to do things, and I felt like I would be okay. And I also told him I didn't have all the answers, but I had a lot of mentors and people that I could go to also.
So we jump ahead then to Salt Lake Community College, and is it true that when you started here, your office had like a piece of plastic or a sheet for the door? I've heard that story.
Well, it was one of the tough sheds. It used to be the old testing center used to be, you know, the tough shed that was that used to be the athletic office.
Okay.
So on the south side was the offices, but on the north side was a section that was male dorms. They had just done, you know, office sections and put furniture in and stuff like that, and it had a sheet on it. So there was a sheet that separated the dorms from the office area only.
Interesting.
So that was one of my first things. We had a locking door with the lock on my side.
So did that ever bother you or get old that you, for better or for worse, were this trendsetter, the first woman? And did that womanness come before your skills as the actual athletic director?
You know, I didn't ever look at it as a bother or anything. I had goals and I just plugged ahead. I was also the first woman to officiate a boys basketball game here in Utah, and I remember being on the court with the media in my face before the game, and I was already nervous enough. At halftime interviewing me and things like that, and questions about, are you setting the trends for others? At the time, I wasn't setting any trends for anything. I just had a desire to see if I could do that level and to see if I'd like to do that level. Now, as it turned out, I can do the level, but politically, I didn't get the assignments, even though I was in the top 8 on the list. I had to fight for assignments, and then every time you went on the floor, it was a severe test by the coaches and the fans, and I decided after a while, I'd proved my goal, I was okay with it, I wasn't really having fun, and so I quit doing it.
Doing that.
So, was I a trendsetter? That I didn't look at it as a trendsetter, I was looking at it as this was me, where I was headed in my career, and I was just going forward, to be honest.
Changes now? Easier for women to ref boys'
Absolutely.
games? Okay.
Absolutely. You see women in the pros, you see women sometimes even in the collegiate men's, not as much. But absolutely, it's much easier for women, and they're doing some of the high school calling. It's just hard to get women into refereeing and officiating, period. It's hard to get sometimes even men into officiating.
People would rather play?
Well, I think people aren't as thick-skinned, and they don't like to be brutalized like they are.
Okay.
So I think it's the brutalization that the officials go through.
Yeah. So glass ceiling today for women in sports? Still there? Gone?
I think it's more open, way more open. There's probably a dozen, maybe, athletic directors in Division I schools around the country. There's a lot of associate athletic directors in SWA, senior women administrators. So I think the opportunities are there. People still need to fight, and they need to get there, and they need to make themselves available to do that. And I think even in the replacement of this position, a woman that could have been strong could have been seriously looked at as a replacement for this position. Yeah. We find, however, that women aren't necessarily going back in and being the coaches and being the administrators. There's been a decrease in that happening. And one of the things I want to do in retirement is to go into the high schools in the Wasatch Front and talk to women athletes about giving back in some way. Doesn't mean they can't be married, they can't have children. It means how do you give back and make it better than what you had? And who's going to be the future? Because what's happening right now is the role models for women athletes is male coaches. And interesting enough, when the pay wasn't so good, whether it be refereeing, coaching, or administrator, women still dominated. But when the pay started getting better, we started seeing the influx of men into those areas also.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's national or Intermountain West?
Oh, no. It's national.
Everywhere?
Everywhere.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to take another break, but when we come back, I want to talk specifically about some of what's gone on here. I mean, we have more sports that we didn't used to have, incredible new facilities, including the LAC here, and it seems like, we've gone from a couple sticks and a rock to what we are today here. So keep it tuned to Community Roundtable. We'll be back, talk some more with Norma Carr about Salt Lake Community College athletics and our athletes who are from all over the world. Keep it tuned. We'll be right back. We are back on Community Roundtable talking with Salt Lake Community College Director Norma Carr, Athletic Director Norma Carr, who's soon to retire after over 20 years, 25 years?
25.
Well, congratulations.
Thanks.
That's a lot of change here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like as we were sort of alluding to or joking about, a sheet between buildings and living in outdoor sheds. Now we have this fantastic LAC building where students can go and work out. We have a huge program with everything from yoga to weight training for students. That's all on you?
No, not all on me. I remember when I first came in, we just purchased South Campus, the South High School. And the gymnasium and the pool were the only things open. Okay. Everything else was being gutted from asbestos and closed. And they were converting the gymnasium to a college floor, and I got in on that plan. Plus we had to convert boys' locker rooms to co-ed, put some athletic spaces in there, and on and on and on. And then every time we had a contest, you had to take everything on the road and put up a concessions and put up a ticket booth and then bring it all back.
Oh, wow. So what's different about a high school floor and a college floor?
Size of the dimensions of a basketball floor.
Okay.
So you had to move the goals back, and we had to expand the floor. So from there, when we got the ability to build the LAC, it was a 5-year project. 2 years just to get the money and do a bunch of architectural things, and then 2 years to finally build it. And we had a great group of architects and contractors that were very user-friendly, let us in on every decision as we went along. The softball field was a result of the library being built when I first came on, and it displaced the softball field and tennis courts, so there was money given to relocate those. So we built the softball field with athletics future in mind, rather than just a backstop, and built more tennis courts because of that, and then eventually later we got Kate Field because we had baseball.
And again, we didn't have baseball or softball, right, when you started?
We were a 2-sport program when I started, men's and women's basketball. And maybe 5 years or more down the road, we were given the opportunity to have baseball and volleyball.
And women's volleyball does fantastic nationally.
And then later we brought softball on a year or two later. So,
And then we have other sports that are more like club sports, right? Like soccer, football.
We have soccer that's really club sports. And if we were to expand and have the opportunity to expand financially and otherwise, we'd probably expand to men's and women's soccer right now. That would be our next two sports.
That'd be cool. So LAC, was that funded, the Lifetime Activity Center, was that funded through the normal state legislature process, or was that, so it's not student money? It was a regular college building?
It was both. Part of it, about $10 million, was bonded through the students to finish it. and about 10-15 million was direct money from the legislature at that time.
And again, that Rocky Mountain Review, right? So some famous basketball people have been through there.
Yeah, many years of that, and we saw a lot of rookies and other people coming through there and wanting to move up and so on.
College graduation was there for many years until we outgrew it?
Yep.
Is that building still viable, or are we due for a new one?
Oh no, it's in great shape. It just needs to be maintained. And you know, we've had a long-standing relationship with the Utah High School Activities Association. We host the 4 and the 5A women's or girls basketball tournament there for a 6-day stint every year. So that's also another big event that we've been able to bring into that facility. Yeah.
So in all these years with all these different and new sports, what changes have you seen in the actual athletes that come here and study and play? What's new and different?
The athletes, they're more talented. We've reached out.
Oh, interesting.
We've reached out more to some international and some out of state. We still, however, try to make our core the in-state athlete. And sometimes the in-state athlete is cyclical. Some years they aren't as good and there's not as many, so we don't have as many to choose from because Division I takes the first crop, obviously. So sometimes it forces you to go more out of state than to stay in-state. But
I mean, we've had volleyball players from Brazil. I mean, we've had folks from all over the world. Who does that recruiting?
It's usually done through referral. We don't actively go to Brazil and do it. It's done through referral of other people, and lots of times Division I coaches.
So those are just your connections and people you know, and people your coaches know, obviously?
Absolutely. More coaches know than me, yeah.
So I wonder for you, as AD today compared to when you started, it seems to me your job must be very different, especially in terms of money.
It's very different. The first 10 years here was extremely challenging. A woman in a male role, and people didn't understand me on campus, and sometimes my own staff members didn't. And the program had started off on probation. When I got here, it was on probation, the men's basketball, because they'd done some very inappropriate things. And every year the AP press would bring that up and we'd get splashed and hit again for about the first 10 years. It was extremely challenging because there was no policies, there was no procedures. They did not know how to handle us in travel policies and anything. So all of those had to be established. And like I said, for the first 10 years it was extremely challenging. Money-wise, not so bad in those first 10 years because we only had 2 sports. But as we began to expand and do things, then the challenge to budget the program appropriately and to keep it at that level with, because the majority of our money comes from student fees, so population and what we have on campus makes a difference in what happens to us. So boom years are good, but then we've been in sliding enrollments in the last 4 years at least, and so that's put us in an interesting situation budget-wise.
Where does your job dovetail with sort of other fundraising? I mean, are you out there pitching to corporations and grants and all that as well?
Oh, absolutely, and we have a person that does that, but still, it's very challenging in a metropolitan area that has everything going from high school to every pro team possible, to every big college possible, and we're unknown, you know, in the Valley. You don't see much in the media on us. Even with the year we won the national tournament, we were visible for about a month and then we were invisible again. So it's very, very challenging for people to know about us and know our story and to hook their star to us and to get those kind of corporate sponsorships and so on.
I mean, we've seen the U move into Pac-12, so stratosphere money, right? Television.
Yeah.
I mean, that can't help getting more attention for Salt Lake Community College.
No, it doesn't help us at all.
Yeah. Good point. I mean, I think of the Northwestern football players wanting to unionize because they want a chunk of the change and so on.
Yeah.
But still, you know, your coaches, your athletes, nationally ranked. I mean, women's softball almost they've come within one game. 3 years in a row?
One out. One out
from winning. And of course, you mentioned men's basketball, who were the NJCAA winners a few years back. And is there something else going on that 2-year athletes just don't get the attention, or is it just there's too many schools near us?
Locally here, the media looks at, they don't have the vision for community colleges, period. like California, Arizona, there's the vision of what they are, and they accept that. But they look at people that come to us as they can't make it anywhere else.
Oh.
And that's
okay.
really not true. It's, you know, in our case, because most of our athletes aren't educationally needing this level. Some of them are, yes. But a lot of them could be recruited and played other levels too. And so it's the attitude of what community colleges really are all about.
I mean, it seems like academics suffers from that here too. I'm just
Yep.
doing my generals. It's Redwood
Yep.
High.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So, well, I don't want to end on a bummer note like that, but we've only got a couple minutes left
Okay.
here, and I wonder, you mentioned what's next for you, going back out to the high schools?
I want to go back out and I want to talk to high school student athletes about giving things back and maybe looking at things a little bit different, see if we can make a difference there. Other than that, I'm going to do some part-time gigs of things that I've been doing, and travel for me
Yeah. Oh,
and my
cool.
dog,
Oh, fun.
and recreate finally and take care of me for a little bit.
You can go rollerblading yourself, right,
Yeah,
at long
yeah,
last.
yeah.
Back more officiating?
No,
Done with that?
done with that. It would have been fun to have been able to work a three-man crew on a basketball court, maybe do some pro ball, but I'm so far out of the political side of it, it would be, it would take forever to get back into it
Okay.
now. So.
Well, I know some of our basketball players go out in the high schools, so we want to wish you well.
Okay.
And thank you, because seriously, 25 years, this astronomical changes here in athletics, as well as everything, but especially what we see with our players. So thank you very much. Appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Oh, thanks for doing this too. Thanks for taking
Okay.
time. And thank you for joining us on Community Roundtable. Maybe you have a comment or a question. Maybe you have an idea for a show that we should do. Get in touch. Our email address, roundtable@slcctv.com. And please do remember, you can check out all our episodes, slcctv.com. All the episodes there, you can podcast them, watch them again. This is Nick Burns. Do keep it tuned, SLCC TV. Thanks.